Thank you. So without further ado, I would very much like to hand over to Harald Lossack, head of the Global Project on Mainstreaming Ecosystem-Based Adaptation, who will speak the welcome to this webinar on Down to Earth, while soil is so important for ecosystem-based adaptation. Thank you, Harald.
Thank you very much, Christine. Yes, dear participants, as head of the Global Project, financed by the German government through the International Climate Initiative, Ipcc, it is a great pleasure for me to open this webinar entitled Down to Earth. It is almost a special day. 30 years ago, on May 9th, 1992, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, was adopted. Today, 30 years ago. It was one of the 3 international conventions that came out of the UN Conference on Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, where I had the opportunity to participate when I was a young man. The second Rio Convention is the one on biological diversity, CBD. The interlinkages between biodiversity and climate change, especially in the field of adaptation, are many. Approaches building on ecosystem conservation, management, and restoration to protect people from the harmful consequences of a changing climate are called ecosystem-based adaptation, EBA. But we should not forget the third Rio Convention, the UN Convention on Combat Desertification, UNCCD, which has for 30 years now led the work to stop land degradation and sustainably managing soils. And there is a great deal of synergies between ecosystem-based adaptation and soils, which so far have received little attention. That's why we, as a global program on mainstreaming EBA, decided to commission a guidebook on ecosystem soil and the potential role of soil and sustainable soil management for adaptation. And we are very glad that FACT Consult with Andrea Beste, Dr. Andrea Beste, and Naomi Lawrence as international experts was available. And I'm very happy that we are ready to launch this publication just in time for the UNCCD COP15, which started yesterday under the theme Land, Life, Legacy, from Scarcity to Prosperity. We hope that our publication will be useful to practitioners and policymakers for climate change, biodiversity, and land management alike, and contribute a little bit to strengthening between the 3 Rio Conventions. And now, without much further ado, I would like to hand back to our moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harald, for this introduction and also, reminding of us why this topic was is so important. And from my side, I also don't want to say too much. We will now hear 2 inputs on the topics that are covered in the guidebook. And after each input, we will have a session with questions and answers. So if there's something that comes to your mind during the presentations, use the chat, or afterwards you can also raise your hand to ask your question yourself. So without further ado, I want to give the floor to Dr. Andrea Beste, who's an international soil expert and one of the authors of the guidebook, and who will give us a better understanding of how soil contributes to climate change adaptation. So Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christine. I'm happy to be here, and I welcome all of you to this presentation of our guidebook. And I will now try to share my screen. I'm happy if you see all what's here to see.
Yes.
And I will present the part of the guidebook which focuses on soil management. And first, I would like to cite a set of the former Director General of FAO, which he said 2014. He said, the multiple roles of soils often go unnoticed. Soils don't have a voice and few people speak out of them, but they are our silent ally in food production. And currently, also the Global Land Outlook #2 of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification also stated that 40% of the land surface where agriculture can take place is degraded because of wrong land management. And that is a fact what should wake us up to look more, to focus more on soils and what they can do for us. Additionally, there is another fact what is affecting soil, it's climate change. It has huge impact on soils because of drought and of heavy rainfall. So the affection is in a multitude of different ways, but all of them, or the most of them, or the most crucial of them, the affection is a fundamentally altered water cycle. So we have increased drought that destroys soil organisms because they need humidity to live, but we have also extreme rainfall events that trigger erosion and soil loss. And if you have droughts, as vegetation cover goes back, the microclimate becomes hotter and local humidity decreases. So that is the increasing circle that states play here. But sustainable soil management can be a solution, but yet too often the links among soil, vegetation and climate are not properly appreciated. So let's look a little bit more deeply on that. Soils are the basis. They are the basis for all ecosystem services. They keep terrestrial ecosystems intact. And after food production, the most important function of soils is the storage of water and the regulation of vegetation growth. It's not just the plants that we can eat which play a big role, but it's just the vegetation which produces humidity and which produces water cycle in the watersheds. So transpiration and local water cycle regulation make ecosystems resilient against the mentioned climate stress. And soils also have a direct influence on the climate because when compacted, they emit the greenhouse gas nitrous oxide, but the other way around, with good structure and active soil life, they form humus and store CO2. And so they are helping us to combat climate change and to help to produce more resilient ecosystems. So in order to provide these ecosystem services and to maintain soil fertility, the soils need vital soil biota. These little microorganisms are crucial for a functioning soil system. They clean water, they exchange nutrients and form the soil structure. Water and nutrients can also be stored and released. So without these colleagues of us which are working deep in the soil, nothing can stay play. We would not have vegetation, we would not have food, we would not have fiber, we would not have nothing growing on this little space of ground. And to support soil biota as basis for resilient systems, the essential elements of sustainable soil management are increasing soil organic matter, promoting soil life, and promoting diversity, but both below and above ground. Most times we talk about diversity above ground, but we have also to look at the diversity below ground, because this is the basis for our food production. And so to support this soil biota, this is best achieved with the following management principles: with compost application, with crop rotation, or with intercropping, or better both, or with agroforestry or permaculture, what is at least a bit more differentiated and maybe for European eyes a little bit creepy and a little bit many people say it's not just an order we should have in agriculture on the fields, but this diversity and this biodiversity and this mixture of plants keeps soils and keeps ecosystems to be resilient against climate stress and also other stresses. So, to coming to an end, key messages are: sustainable soil management is a key strategy for ecosystems-based adaptation to climate change. Sustainable soil management supports interaction with the soil ecosystem and thus stabilizes the whole land use system. Compost and root systems are the best tools to support soil conditions. Soil life is the basis of resilience against biological and climate stresses. And diversity above and below ground is, for all this, the main principle. And now I have to be sorry, so I forgot to take some 2 questions for you to give answers about some knowledge about soil, but I think we can maybe start them now at the end. Sorry for that. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much. So before we go into the rounds of questions and answers, we would like to do a short quiz. And I would like to ask my colleague Lukas to come in and guide you through this quiz. Lukas, are you there?
Yeah. Hi there. I just posted the first question for our quiz into the chat. Please, as you see, I have numbered it with A, B, and C. As unfortunately, we have noticed that the forms quiz we have prepared doesn't work. We would like to do it a bit differently, and we would have you write the answer you think is correct into the chat. So A, B, or C, which one is it? I would now like you to please put your answer into the chat. We have 1A, B, A. I see a lot of A's, some B's. No C's so far. One C. I can actually tell you A is correct. 12% of the Earth's land surface can be used for intensive agriculture, so not quite that much as you would think. 12% is really not a lot. And I'd like to continue with our second question. Same procedure. I will post it into the chat right now, and you give me your answer. So 1 hectare of soil contains what amount of microorganisms? 50 G, 1 ton, 15 tons. BBC, C, No A's this time. Yeah, there are a lot of C's. And that actually is the correct answer. 15 tons in 1 hectare. That's quite a lot, I think. But goes to show how important those small critters and microorganisms really are, and what an impact they can make. So I would finish the quiz right now and hand back to Christine.
Thank you, Lucas. So I see we have a lot of experts here who know a lot about soil already, but I still want to invite you to ask your questions to Andrea Beste's input. So you can raise your hand and maybe you can switch on your camera if you pose a question, or you can write it in the chat. So I don't see any hands as yet. Maybe people still have to think about it. Lucas, are there any questions in the chat?
No questions so far. One hand.
There's a question from Erinda. Do you want to come in? Ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I would be curious to know if there's a difference between these 15 tons for a general, agriculture, monoculture, or if we're looking at agroecology or something a bit more biological. Is there a difference? Thanks.
Thank you. Andrea, you want to take this question?
Yes, thank you. That's the question what comes up. In the minute you can read this answer and these questions clear. I think the people who presented these figures, and it comes from the Soil Atlas from Friend of the Earth, Germany, and they cited these figures. I think they took back on a really sound soil, a soil which has its own local optimum of biological life and soil biota in the soil. And okay, we have differences between tropical soils and soils in the middle latitudes in soil biota but I think these 15 tons, what is the equivalent to 20 cows, you can imagine, more or less. I think they took a really sound soil in the middle latitudes as example for this, to have some nice figures that you can imagine about soil biota.
Thank you, Andrea. Are there any more questions?
We do have one question in the chat. Can you explain more on how compacted soil emit NO2?
Yeah, if the more compacted a soil is, the more humid is it. And if you have a humid soil, you have a situation where NO2 is developed. And so this compacted soil, this comes from the humid situation in which you have the production of NO2 more than if you have more air in the soil. For example, if you are plowing, then you have the production of CO2 a kind of more, and if you have a compacted soil, then you have a more humid situation, and then NO2 is developing.
Thank you, Andrea. I see there's a hand up from Luise Richter. You want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Christine, and thank you, Dr. Beste, for the input. I have a question that is a bit more sort of related to, I want to say, the communication side of the topic of ecosystem soils. You already mentioned this in the beginning, that it's sort of the silent ecosystem that we don't talk so much about, and that is also, at least under my impression, not so much in the focus of a lot of sort of the big international political debates, even though you just showed how important it is. What's sort of the reason behind it, and how can we work on this and improve this? Because it is such an important system, and of course it's sort of part of the whole agroecology debate and so on. But I still feel like it's being overlooked a lot, maybe due to its tangibility also a little bit. It's maybe harder to say where it begins and where it ends in comparison to, let's say, a specific forest or so. But I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts on this, what we can do to improve sort of the attention that is given to this.
Yeah, I think first of all, the reason is that we don't see the biodiversity in soil. It's dark, and the most people think it's dirt. If they are not grown in land area, the most of people think that it's just dirt that they have to put away from the potatoes they have bought. And the other reason is that the soil organisms are not like ice bears or like pandas. They are not sweet. You cannot make some little nice campaigns with them and reach up the people to be interested to save these animals. I think this is also a big reason for that. And then the last thing I think is with land management, we have learned that it's better and simpler to have a kind of technical land management where you use simple things, put them into the soil, use them as black box, and then you get your grow and get your yield from it. And so over some decades, I think we have not been interested really in what is going up there. We just were interested in the yield and were not interested in which nice little animals or microorganisms, how they live there and if they are happy and if somebody cares about them. So this is really a short answer. It's much more difficult, and what's going on with politics, maybe we hear some more on that in the next presentation, I think. But I think these are maybe the three main reasons because why we oversee the soil life so often.
And maybe just following it up, you've been working as a soil expert for a long time, Andrea. So what is your experience when you talk to people who are not specialists on soil? What gets their attention?
Depends on with whom you are speaking. When you're speaking to farmers who are interested in soil, then you have really interest and engagement to change some things and to make some things better. And that is really if they wanted to hear you. So if I had paid money to hear you, they are really interested, and you don't have to fight fights with them. They really like to do something and like to change something in the behavior and in the management. And if you're talking to people from the city, to consumers, you need to go. You need to have to make the round on sound food or the quality of food to reach them, to tell them something about the importance of soil. So you have to step into their lives and their interests. And if you don't do this, they are a little bit like that. They find it ugly to deal with soil. It's something like a deep black, dirty thing that they don't understand.
Thank you. I think that maybe gives us some ideas of how to promote soil as something positive and something vital. So maybe, Lukas, is there one more question that was raised? You are muted, but I think that was a no.
Yeah, no questions so far, no further questions. Yeah, doch. Now we do have one. Why do we still see so many intensive orchard agriculture, especially in the Mediterranean, olives, almond, etc., with very bare soil beneath trees, while these soils seem of very poor quality and prone to soil erosion? Would it not make sense to improve these types of bare soil conditions, using cover crops, etc.?
I would say yes, yes, and yes. So I think it's just a short answer. It's just cheaper. It's just cheaper to produce apples or pears or something like that, or wine. It's cheaper to produce this with an intensive management with high external input, what not deals really with soil life. And so I think we have to think also about our consumer practice, what we are buying and what we are not buying.
Thank you, Andrea. If there are no other questions, and I don't see anyone raising their hands, then I think we say a very big thank you to Dr. Andrea Beste for sharing us. And if you want to know more, there's lots more on that topic in the guidebook itself. But now we go on to the next topic of the guidebook. And I would like to invite Ulrich Kindermann from the Global Project on Mainstreaming EBA to share with us some of the insights from the guidebook on soil governance and its challenges. So Uli, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Christina. Hello and welcome also from my side. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, so my name is Uli Kindermann. I work for the Global Program on Mainstreaming Ecosystem-Based Adaptation. I've been the focal point for this guidebook in the last couple of months. But I'm kind of standing in for our second author, Naomi Lorenz, who is on maternity leave right now. So actually she can't give that presentation in person. But after Andrea Beste has introduced you to the more soil science background of the topic, I would like to speak a bit more about soil and national climate policies and also about governance, because this is the second part of our guidebook. Wait a second. Can you see the second slide? So we have a chapter on soil policies, and we have another chapter on soil governance, because these are also, when you, as we want to do, give a general overview, these are things to consider when you want to talk about the interlinkages between EBA and soil. So that was one too fast. But first of all, I would like to take a look at the latest Ipcc assessment report, impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability. So that's the assessment report of Working Group 2. Just three quotes to put that topic into perspective. So one thing the report finds that water and soil conservation features among the top 4 adaptation responses almost anywhere. So it's really a key issue for adaptation that's widely recognized also by the Ipcc. It has examples like installing nature-based solutions to increase infiltration on slopes and increase permeability, so water infiltration of soils can reduce the impact of floods. I think it was in some cases up to 20% reduce flood risk. But it also states that climate change is estimated to be responsible for an increase of 30 to 66% of soil erosion by 2070. So that's massive. So there's a positive impact soils can play, and sustainable soil management can play on adaptation, but soil management also needs to take into consideration how the climate will change and how the soil management needs to react to this. But now looking at international policies, Harald has mentioned in the introduction that there are 3 Rio Convention, and now we have the Agenda 2030 and the SDG. And the most prominent international convention for the topic of soils is obviously the UNCCD, which has a target of land degradation neutrality, and that's by now also SDG 15.3. So there's an explicit link between UNCCD and SDG. In the UN climate framework, you have mechanisms like the CONIVIA Joint Work Program on Agriculture, where soils play a key role. You have it featured in explicitly or implicitly in many national determined contributions, the same for national adaptation plans, and also in the biological diversity. The key document will be the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is currently under negotiation. it will hopefully be adopted at COP 15 of the CBD, which is scheduled to be held end of August, September this year in Kunming. And then in the biodiversity field, the national plans are called National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, and they also have many interlinkages with soil and soil management. And now if we look at one example, we picked the first NDC of Tunisia. So just to give you 4 quotes, so if you look at consolidation of water and soil conservation, as was mentioned before, it's one of the top 4 adaptation responses. So it's explicitly mentioned as an adaptation measure, soil. It also mentions promote and develop conservation agriculture to store carbon. So it's also an explicit mention of soil in the mitigation field. So there's a synergy, adaptation, mitigation, soil in this NDC. But if you look closer, you find targets like biological consolidation of work to combat silting, action plans to counter desertification, and these obviously are implicitly and require sustainable soil management for adaptation, and Andrea Beste had it in her presentation. So it also had promote organic agriculture to limit N2O emissions. So it's also implicit mentioning of soil in many perspectives in an NDC. So, but I don't want to go into that example too much in detail. I want to now move from national policies to governance, because what you have in these national policies like NDC, NAP, or also NBSUP or SDG action plans and many other national policies, these policies determine what needs to be done. Governance processes are needed to determine how things are managed, so how soil is actually managed and protected, and last but not least, who decides what to do. And just not going too much into detail on that, but I would like to draw your attention. If you're interested in this aspect of governance, we have a chapter in the guidebook, but we also have a full publication on governance for ecosystem-based adaptation, which is available on Adaptation Community. And now, if we look a little bit more closer into soil governance, there's a definition by FAO. So they define soil governance as achieve sustainable soil management and avoid degradation and conflict between different users. And things that were required according to this definition are collaboration between governments, coherent policies, effective and fair institutions, both formal and also informal institutions, and also involvement and clear roles of all stakeholders, including civil society and private sector. So it is quite a number of challenges related to governance. And I'll conclude with this because this is supposed to be only just a brief overview. Some challenges we identified, as with many other governance aspects, is that we experience a fragmentation of responsibilities. So you don't have a ministry of soil. Obviously, a lot of people might see the responsibility with a ministry of agriculture, but that doesn't cover it all. For example, if you talk about interlinkages between soil, climate, and environment, it's obviously the Ministry of Environment Protection or whichever ministry is responsible of biodiversity and climate change. It also needs to involve, and usually planning ministries and several other ministries as well. Then you have the interest of common good versus private property. So it is obviously in the common interest to protect soil as a common good, as we've heard, as really the foundation, the basis for food production, but also for terrestrial ecosystem-based adaptation processes. But often you need to talk about measures on private property. So it's hard to enforce things. You need to always have those private landowners on board and find solutions with them. The other issue is along timescales. I said this, increase in soil erosion by climate change is estimated till 2070. So this is a creeping process. You don't have, usually you don't have, so like you can have with a wildfire, you have a forest and then after the wildfire, the forest is gone. But with soil erosion, it's really, a little bit each year and each rainfall, a little bit is eroded, and it's an accumulated effect is often only visible after a very long time scale, sometimes decades, when it's actually too late to intervene. And a fourth challenge is it's often in many countries it's actually not covered by environmental law. So if someone starts cutting down a forest, there's usually a law which is this is illegal logging, this is illegal, you have to stop it. If someone manages soil unsustainably, there's no enforcement to say, no, you're not allowed to do this. So you can say that it's a problem, it is wrong, but you have no legal mechanism to intervene. And there are, of course, there's a multitude of other challenges: intergenerational equity, tenure rights, and weak enforcement mechanisms of those laws that exist, lack of information, what is actually the status of soils, because you don't see it directly in many cases, lack of information on governmental plans related to this because of fragmentation, also unclear assignment of responsibilities. So there's really a lot of challenges related to soil policies and soil governance. Yeah, and I would like to leave my short overview here and just would say thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your question and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Uli, for this short but comprehensive overview on the challenges of soil policies and soil governance. And it's very good to see that Tunisia is already taking up this question to maybe, improve soil management for their olive trees. So are there questions from the group? Are there questions in the chat, Lucas?
We do have one question. CIMMYT has performed conservation agriculture research in the Global South since the 90s. Climate smart agriculture since 2010. Our scientists see a last mile problem. How to anchor practices change post-project. Practicable regulation incentives keep knowledge where it needs to be over time, whilst farmers experience concrete benefits. Any best practice examples, last mile?
To be honest, as I said, our lead author on this chapter is on maternity leave, and I don't have enough expertise on last mile questions to answer this question. I'm not sure if Dr. Beste, if you would have any best practices on this, but I would, unfortunately, I can't answer this question on last mile best practices.
Yeah, I can say something to climate smart agriculture. So we have a huge range of models and projects and methodologies to deal with these words, with climate change, climate smart agriculture. So it depends. It depends heavily on what management principles you are introducing, and the main management principles who are really important I mentioned in my presentation. But we have gone more deeply in these questions. We have also wrote a little bit about no-tillage and conservation agriculture in the publication, and so just download it and look into it, and then you will see that there are situations when they are good, and that there are also situations when we would say that this is not really helpful to introduce it in this way. So it depends.
Thank you. There's a question from Luna. Do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you very much, and hi everyone. No, more than a question. I just wanted to comment on Uli's last guidebook, because we are trying to reach out to different stakeholders who might be involved in the implementation of NDCs in Latin America. Some of the colleagues know, and it was interesting to talk to those who are in charge of the CBD. The Convention on Biodiversity, because they really see the need to talk to people from agriculture, but unfortunately they don't usually talk to each other. So I think as Uli presented, these more national frameworks that are commitments to the at the international level too, are, I believe, a good opportunity to bring these people on the table. They don't usually talk to each other, but they see the need to collaborate with each other on these common goals, especially on soil related goals. So just a comment of our experience here in Latin America.
Thank you very much, Mauricio. That's great to know, and I think there are more of these examples that are also, well, I think within the guidebook, but also from other people. So,
Yeah.
Uli, you want to react?
I would like to react on this first because one person just mentioned in the chat that she had to leave. So I just also, this is a launch event. So before anyone leaves this event, please look at the chat. We just shared the link where this webinar recording will be available. And we also shared the link of the publication, so you'll find full details there. But on Mauricio's point on this people not talking to each other, that we really find a key issue. You know, we have these 3 international conventions for 30 years now. And you have great experts in climate change, national experts, national focal points in climate change and biodiversity and land degradation, but often they're so busy with their everyday tasks that they fail to really go into full exchange with the other fields. And Mauricio, we've talked about this. What we're also seeing is countries have spent a lot of a lot of effort into updating the NDC, increasing their ambition on climate change, and a lot of these measures they've committed to are explicitly relevant for biodiversity and soil, and this would be very helpful for the soil people, agriculture people, and the biodiversity people. For example, now if you have a new convention on biodiversity, a new global framework, all the countries will have to update their national biodiversity action plans, their NBSUP. And if they can take those relevant activities with a lot of synergies from the NDC, you have a lot of, high level of ambition without having to negotiate something new with the other ministries. So these are synergies which are often underexplored because often counterparts don't talk with each other. Actually, we have a publication on this coming up, which will be published later on this year, explicitly on synergies between various national policies. But we do see it as a key issue that you need not only to know the topics, but you need to get the people to talk to each other.
Thank you. Mauricio, you want to react? Because you switched on your camera.
No, just a quick reaction. Yes, I just wanted to have it on while Uli was referring to my comment. We're actually going to have an event on the linkages between the certification convention and the NDCs from Latin America in the upcoming COP next Monday. So I'm going to share the link for those who speak Spanish, more than welcome. So we have selected examples of commitments from NDCs in the Latin American Caribbean region that contribute to the certification convention. And we're gonna showcase some examples of that we've been like project implementation on the ground as well. So it's gonna have a little bit of policy. It's gonna have a little bit of action on the ground. So I'm gonna share the link on the chat in a moment.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Great to know. So I don't see any hands up. Lucas, is there anything in the chat?
Yes, we have 2 questions. One from Luise concerning the input from Victor from before. I would also be very interested in hearing more on this from Victor directly. Sounds like super interesting work. Maybe Victor might, if you're comfortable and available, maybe you want to switch on your camera and tell us more if you want.
Yeah, maybe also quickly to clarify, it was not so much a direct question, but more interest in your work, because I don't think I would have answers. It just sounds super interesting what was done, and would be great to hear a bit more about, like, is this linked to sort of the theory of change thought of actually, okay, we have to change something along the pathway that we decided to go for, and now we sort of can't implement that, or sort of in which direction those challenges are actually going.
Well, maybe the easiest, hello everybody, but maybe the easiest thing is we're funded by BMZ. you know, we get funding globally, and BMZ is one of our funders, and BF or GITS FIA is responsible for us. So that will be a very easy first connection point. They have an overview of what all these CGIAR centers are doing, and CIMMYT, which is maize and wheat-based systems, is one of them. And conservation agriculture, you're probably familiar, is an old hat in quotation marks that has been rejuvenated in many forms and many terms, but it always boils down to low soil disturbance, low or no tillage, rotation, which is now called, you know, diversification, cereal legume systems, blah, blah, blah. These are all the above ground efforts to keep soil reasonably, at least fertile, healthy soil. You know, lots of people have lots of different views about what healthy soil is. I don't want to go there. And that's what we've been doing for a long time. And I'm trying to sort of synthesize, and the key thing is a last mile problem. And if you look at conservation agriculture principles that have been adapted in different, you know, you've got your Latin American colleague, who's done it? Well, Argentina. Cereal soybean rotation. Canada. US. But not the global south. Yeah, so that's, and then everybody always says, oh, it must be the complexity of CA. Yeah, okay. Now called climate smart agriculture. It's probably also about things that have nothing to do with the practice as such. Yeah, and even though the practice makes lots of sense for the soil, but the enabling condition is just not there. The extension agents, the knowledge doesn't stay there. So
thank you. I think that's lots. I mean, there's very large questions. And I think in view of time, I would like to invite Uli to comment. And then I think we have one last question.
Yeah, so I can't, as I said, I can't really comment on this, but I think it shows the complexity of how many perspectives there can be on the topic. So as a program on working on global knowledge management on ecosystem-based adaptation, which is the link between adaptation to climate change and biodiversity conservation, we're looking more at the perspective and like, how can we bring it more in the agenda on both, you know, among climate change practitioners and biodiversity practitioners, and those are both not really the stakeholders with much to say in agriculture. So, but that's a key problem in both fields, that you would need the agriculture people on the table, and they're not at the COPs, they're not at the negotiations. So it is really a problem. But I didn't see. I wanted to not really make a comment, but before time is up, wanted to make another invitation, because I had mentioned that long-term challenges and that the timescale is an issue. And we'll have a session on long-term strategies at the EBA Knowledge Day, which will happen on June 2nd. So anyone who wants to learn more about EBA in general, or also I think agroecology, long-term scales, problems. We have a range of sessions, so save the date. It's on June 2nd, EBA Knowledge Day, for the 8th time, a virtual event. And now I have to check the chat, which for the other question, I must have seen, I might have missed that one.
Lucas, do you have it there, the other question?
The other question would be, what about farmer carbon credit pilot projects? That looks like a promising avenue. Is GIZ involved in that?
To be honest, GIZ has more than 1,000 projects, and please don't expect me to keep track of every single one. And then, so we are an adaptation project, so we are not involved with carbon credits at all, because that's a mitigation topic. And so we know the colleagues here in the climate change department, which are directly working on carbon, market mechanisms and these issues. I would have to ask them, but I'm not aware. In the EBA community of practice, I'm not aware of any project working on carbon credits, because our perspective is more on, the adaptation benefit, and then the carbon credits are not so relevant in that field. It's more to have the most effective adaptation response.
Thank you, Uli. And I think that's a very nice way to also close this webinar. So I think for me, what I really learned today, the key takeaways are, we really need to get people to understand and value soil better. And we need to step into their worlds. We need to understand their interests to make them see also why soil matters for that. And get people to talk to each other on the policy level, and maybe also between policy level and the practical level. These are, of course, just first ideas. We do hope that once you download the publication, you will get more background. You maybe get also other ideas of how to, take up soil in your work. There are also some recommendations formulated at the end of the guidebook. And I think from my side, I can just say thank you. Come to the Knowledge Day if you want to learn more about EBA, look at the publication, share your feedback with us, and have a very nice day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.